For the past 2 weeks, we've seen videos of Nigerians sleeping and camping out at ATM machines and even getting violent across the country. There have been videos of banks hoarding the new Naira notes and videos of violence that have occurred in several towns in Nigeria. Will the president's announcements from his Thursday morning address change anything at all? Zeal Akaraiwe joins me live in the studio now, financial advisor and the founder and CEO of Graeme Blaque Advisory. Zeal, welcome to Politics HQ. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Tolu.
So let's start with this. From the president's speech, it's the old 500 and 1,000 Naira notes that remain withdrawn. But it's just the 200 Naira notes, the old one, that can exist with the new one for a little less than 60 days. What makes the 200 Naira probably exceptional, or the exception in this case?
I have no idea.
I will not accept that answer.
Well, the thing is, if you look at the distribution of currency, we have about 50 to 55% of the currency in circulation is the 1,000 Naira note, so roughly half. And then between 25 and 30% of what's in circulation is the 500 Naira note. The 200 Naira note is only about 7% of what's in circulation. So give or take plus or minus 10% around 200 billion. That's what 200 Naira notes represent. It's nowhere near enough. According to the president in his speech this morning, they've successfully withdrawn 2.1 trillion. And they've reinjected a maximum of 300 to 400 billion. And they want to add another 200 billion. It doesn't cut it. So the reason I think, and this is completely just what I think, they've put in the 200 is because they believe those who have hoarded the old currency have done it in the larger denominations.
Because it's easier to move.
It's easier to move, yeah. So I think to catch them out still, they are saying, okay, let's do something to make the people feel like we're sensitive about the plight they're going through and pushing the 200. But it's not, for 200 billion in the whole we have, it's not going to do very much.
So let's talk about currency in circulation, because it's been a big part of this conversation. So since the announcement, Nigerians have been hearing about currency in circulation and how big of an issue it is. So as of October 2022, currency in circulation had risen to 3.2 trillion Naira. When this administration came in, it was just around 1-point-something trillion, out of which only 500 billion was within the banking system, while 2.7 trillion, according to the CBN, was permanently outside of the system. Of that, as the president said this morning, 2.1 trillion has been retrieved. The president pointed out that having so much money outside of the system had distorted financial policy and also the efficient management of inflation. But here's what's interesting. Data shows us that Nigeria has one of the lowest amounts of currency in circulation relative to GDP or per capita of about 15,200 Naira. That's around $34. In the US, it's 6,700. In the UK, about 1,200 pounds. And in the Eurozone, about 3,600 euros. And even when you come to the African continent, Nigeria still has one of the lowest currency in circulation numbers. So is it really as big of a deal as most Nigerians have been led to believe from what we're hearing from the administration and particularly from the CBN?
It's not, in my opinion, it's not a big deal at all. The reason you print money is to have people who
use it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not meant to sit in the bank. It circulates, right? The reason you're printing money is so that people can have it in their pockets and spend it to take money home. You're using the money, so it helps with the velocity of money. It moves, right? What they are not telling us and what people are not asking is what percentage of cash is money in circulation. Money in circulation, cash is just one part of money in circulation. And the cash we have in circulation is only about 8% of the total money supply.
So
right?
If it's not cash, what else is the money
Transfer,
in circulation?
electronic money. So a lot of us do transfers online. That's money. So, but it's not cash. And what we have as cash, what the difference between M1 and M2, what we have as cash is just about 8% of the total money in circulation. That's not an exorbitant amount. It's not relative to what we need. Now, the whole idea that there is money sitting in people's homes, that's why you printed money. You didn't print money for me to keep it in the bank. If I was going to keep it in the bank permanently, then the money might as well be electronic. So it's not as big an issue. I don't see it as big as an issue as it should be. And the whole idea that it would help inflation, I've not spoken to any economist that's worth his salt that agrees with that. What drives inflation is not cash, it's money. Money is just one aspect, cash is just one aspect of money. So even if we withdraw all the money, if we're totally okay with it, as long as there is more money in circulation, electronic and physical, larger than the productivity of the economy, you will have inflation. And you spoke about the UK. The UK has, give or take, $80 billion in circulation in cash. And the number of unbanked, the number of people that use cash in the UK is only about 1 million. In Nigeria, we have between 30 and 40 million people unbanked. Unbanked means they don't have bank accounts, which means anything they're going to do in any transaction will not terminate in the bank, it terminates in their pockets. Now, 30 million people unbanked, relying on cash, and you are doing this with a 3-month notice, you are going to throw their whole lives into chaos.
So let me pick up from there. In terms of the handling of this policy and the implementation of it, what impact has it had on Nigeria's economy? Nigeria's
economy, it's not going to be easy to tell that now. But the economists I've spoken to who looked at what happened when we did this in 1984 said there was a slump in GDP. Most of them expect at least a 2 to 3% drop in GDP.
Can Nigeria afford that?
We're going to pay for it.
Because when you talk about that slump in GDP, even now, some of the preliminary data showing a slump in consumption and demand coming from the end of January because of this policy as well. And so at the end of the day, you say we pay for it. We can't afford it, but we pay for it.
We pay for it. I mean, it's like a dead book. We can't afford it, but we're paying for it.
All right, we'll leave that at that. So let's talk about something else the president talked about, because you've talked about, in a way, you've gotten into the benefits conversation. And he listed a number of short to medium and long-term benefits of this demonetization policy. And he included the strengthening of macroeconomic parameters, deceleration of the velocity of money in the economy, lowering of the inflation. He also talked about, of course, the collapse of illegal economic activities, which should help stem corruption and acquisition of money through illegal means, the exchange rate stability, and also availability of easy loans and lowering of interest rates, and of course, greater visibility and transparency of financial actions. That's quite a list of things, or sort of a checklist that the president is saying this policy will give us these benefits. Do you think we are going to see any of those benefits in the long term? Are we seeing any benefits now, even in the short term?
So that's a very delicate question, Tolu, because all those things you've listed are things we should strive to achieve. My issue is not whether or not we should achieve, and we absolutely should achieve all the things the president says this will achieve. My concern is that list the president put out, it's not the function of the central bank.
Whose function is it?
So if you're going to fight corruption, I think we have the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, we have the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, we have the police. So each government parastatal has its function. There are laws that set them up. You have their acts. You can check Section 2 of the CBN Act. We know what the CBN is supposed to do. If you want to use what the CBN has done to do other things, that's fine. But you cannot use, CBN is not a law enforcement agency. CBN is a monetary policy agency. Do your monetary policy, use it, and then let the appropriate agencies do what they ought to do. But using the central bank as a tool for what begins to look like more political gains, it makes me uncomfortable, not because of what you're trying to achieve, but in the manner you're trying to achieve it. It's a very expensive way to get this done.
So it's interesting you mentioned the EFCC and the ICPC. So Godwin Emefiele said he met with 15 commercial bank leaderships today in terms of pressing upon them the importance of making sure the old 200 Naira notes continue to circulate. But the president earlier this morning said he had also directed the CBN to intensify collaboration with anti-corruption agencies to ensure that no person or institution is basically a stumbling block in the implementation of this policy. What power, you've talked about this not necessarily being the role of the CBN, but let's talk about it in the CBN and the bank kind of conversation. What can the CBN do to help the banks? What can the CBN do to possibly sanction banks that might be found to be stumbling blocks on the way to implementing this?
No, so let's dial back a bit. What is the problem? If you have a scarcity, it's a very simple issue. Demand outstrips supply. That's what it means. Anytime you have a scarcity, what it means is demand outstrips supply. You want to solve a scarcity problem, you don't bring in police, you don't bring in DSS, you don't bring in EFCC. You increase supply or reduce demand. Now, in the context of this, where we have more or less forced people, imagine somebody, his life savings, for whatever reason, is at home, 100,000 naira, and he takes it to the bank, as you've instructed he should do. Then he goes the next day and give him 2,000. that person will be violent. So what we're asking is the wrong question. If demand outstrips supply, and regarding people's money, you cannot reduce demand, then there's only one thing to do, and that's to increase supply. We know what supply was before. It was 2.1 trillion. Yeah. And we've put in how much? Max they've put in is 400 billion. That's 25% of what you took out. That's the problem. The problem is not banks. Hoarding does not cause this problem. The problem, for when there's a scarcity, people tend to hoard. When there's petrol scarcity, you see jerry cans more. When there's no scarcity, you don't see jerry cans. Jerry cans do not cause the scarcity. Jerry cans are a consequence of the scarcity. Hoarding of a scarce commodity is a consequence of the scarcity. Mm-hmm. So telling people not to hoard when you've released only 25% of what you've extracted goes against the basic human psychology. People are in panic mode. People are going to the banks. I have 200,000 in the bank, and you're telling me take only 20,000, but I need 40. Or I take only 2,000. And my daily living expense between feeding, transportation, my children's, whatever, is 6,000. And you tell me take 2. What do you expect? The moment I can get 10, what do you think I would do?
I'll get 10 and then look to get another 10.
It's as simple as that. It's basic human psychology.
So he's extended the lifespan of the old 200 Naira notes. What does that do for the economy? What does it do for Nigerians?
Like I said, the 200 Naira in circulation is plus or minus 10% around 200 billion. So if they've released a maximum of 400 billion so far, and you add 200 billion to it, that's 600 billion, and you've taken out, according to the president this morning, 2.1 trillion. It doesn't scratch the surface. It's some relief in the sense that I don't think people understand that it's not going to make the impact they expect. You're adding 200 billion to an economy that's starved of 1.5 trillion. It's not going to make much of an indent.
So let's go to vote buying very quickly, Zeal. And that was listed as one of the major reasons when this policy was announced late in October 2022. We are about 8 days out from Nigeria's general elections. When it comes to vote buying, do you think this policy will have the intended effect? It seems to be that we think vote buying is only done via cash.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen vote buying being done via bags of rice, via Indomie, via MTN recharge cards, and all sorts of things. So are there people who will exchange cash for their PVCs to be? Yes, they are. But again, I don't have the data. I don't know how many that is. I don't think anybody has that data. But I don't think it's enough. I don't think cash is enough to sway this decision to put 200 million people's lives in jeopardy. I don't think there are enough people who have only the means to exchange cash for votes. They have other means to exchange their votes if they're going to sell their votes. They can transfer money to them. I mean, I know it would be tedious to transfer that amount of money, small amounts of money, but it can be done. You can buy Indomie and give them, you see them give them bread, Indomie, you see give recharge cards. I mean, there are so many options that this is not enough to put the entire country through this unnecessary trauma.
So interestingly enough, as I discussed with my guest earlier, this is also happening when we've heard from the Bank of England as to the modalities around bringing out the new banknotes and coins for King Charles III. And when we look at the modalities around this, how should this have been handled? Overall, do you think it's a good policy? It's just a bad implementation?
Changing your currency as frequently as you need to is a good policy, period. It should not have any impact. You're swapping. You have 10, I take your 10, I give you 10. It shouldn't have any economic impact whatsoever. Now, the thing is this. One, there's an error we made in the sense that the CBN Act says the CBN can do this with reasonable notice. Now, reasonable is anybody's guess.
Yes.
But the Decimal Currency Act says the CBN can do this with 3 months' notice. So did the CBN give 3 months' notice? Yes, they did. But 3 months is the minimum. So I don't think minimum and reasonable are the same thing. Mm-hmm. So CBN gave the minimum notice, but why is there only 3 months notice? If it's not entirely political, why didn't you give 6 months notice? Why didn't you give 1 year notice? I mean, you could have given much more notice. We know that NSPMC cannot print more than 900 billion or so, 1 trillion tops in a year, right? Which means that they can print 250 billion a quarter, give or take. Some figures around those, like if they print only 1,000 notes. So they needed more time. So first of all, this was a policy that was rushed. It's a good policy, like you said, but implemented in a rush at a point where all the potential risks are maximized. There's huge political risk, there's huge operational risk, and there's huge reputational risk. All these risks were discarded, and they have all crystallized at the same time.
All right, Zeal, we'll have to end the conversation here for now. We are all waiting for the Central Bank of Nigeria to, of course, make its pronouncement, possibly a pronouncement on February the 22nd, which would be 3 days right before the election. But there is something I want you to take away from the conversation, something for you to chew on. How much is your vote worth? My vote, how much is it worth? What can a politician do to influence our votes? Our futures and those of our children are worth more than a couple hundred or 1,000 naira. It's worth more than bags of rice or noodles or even recharged cards. But with millions of Nigerians in poverty and the current naira scarcity, there are fears that vote buying will remain a major challenge in the 2023 general elections. In an election which is being considered the most important in Nigeria's modern democratic history, the risk of losing the future to immediate gratification is high. And let's be honest, where are the politicians who only remember us when elections roll round? Where are they when our children are sick and primary healthcare centers are understaffed and unstocked? Where are they when traveling takes hours longer because of bad roads? Where are they when insecurity is ripping across the country? And where are they when our educational standard continues to deteriorate? Let's really take a close look at ourselves and ask what we stand for, what we stand to gain, and what we stand to lose when we sell our votes. More than 93 million voters will make a decision for over 230 million estimated Nigerians, the critical and crucial decision that will secure our futures. A free, fair, credible, and inducement-free election for Nigeria is in the hands of Nigerians. Our hands. Chew on that.